Is anything being done to stem the surge at the border? Or is the Biden administration only making things worse? With me now to talk about this and more is Congressman Pat Fallon. He represents the 4th Congressional District of Texas and also serves on the House Armed Services Committee and Oversight and Reform Committee. Congressman Fallon, welcome back to the program.
Joseph, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we're glad to have you. You are there in Texas, a lot going on. What's your take on what is happening at the border and why?
Well, what's happening is it's a catastrophe. And why? It's because Joe Biden's policies. He refused to continue the policies of the Trump presidency that worked. The migrant protection protocols, better known as the Wait in Mexico policy, worked. Deporting folks, particularly bad actors, worked. Building a wall works. But he didn't want to do any of that, primarily because it was President Trump's policy. So what we've seen, Joseph, is an explosion of mass unlawful migration on our southern border. Over the past fiscal year, it's about 1.7 million people. I mean, look at that right there, that video that shows 10,000 migrants underneath a bridge. I mean, that's an American city we're importing. We've essentially imported the state of Idaho's population over the last year. We don't know who these people are. And the Biden administration says with one side of their mouth, out of one side of the mouth, they say COVID is a threat. So we're not going to allow anybody to come to this country legally just to visit, just on a tourist visa, or just a trip from Canada, Europe, Asia, all over the world. And yet we are allowing 1.5 million people this calendar year, 1.7 million in the last fiscal year, of folks we don't know who they are. They're largely from countries that have no vaccinations at all. And when we even test them and they test positive for COVID, they're releasing them into the American homeland. This is a travesty and it must stop.
It is a curious point that the COVID guidelines seem to be much more stringent for American citizens than they do for people who aren't American citizens. But there is something unique about the current surge at the border, and that there's a lot of Haitians when typically it's been Southern Americans, people from South America, I should say. Why are we seeing so many people from Haiti now?
So that's another thing to talk about. And it's a very interesting point. Thanks for bringing it up, Joseph, because most Americans think the folks that cross the southern border illegally are Mexican. They're Mexican nationals. And while obviously there's a lot of Mexican nationals that do that, the last year we've seen mostly folks from Central America, primarily Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. But even though that's been the primary impetus, that those folks, 70 other nation states have been represented with folks, their citizens, crossing our southern border illegally just this year, and about 120 countries over the past few years. So it's really not a shock or surprise that we're going to have a concentration of a certain country, being they know Haiti's the poorest country in our hemisphere. And, you know, the reason why they're coming is they think they're going to be able to get in. And under Joe Biden, they're probably not wrong, because that's a long trek. I mean, we're not talking about Monterrey, Mexico. That's a couple-hour drive to the border. This is on the island of Hispaniola in the Caribbean, to then get to, I would presume, Mexico to start, or maybe some other country, and then make their way up to Mexico, to our border. They wouldn't take the journey in the first place if they were going to have to wait in Mexico and be rejected and denied entry in the United States, because then they're going to call back home and tell everybody, don't do what I just did. It was a terrible waste of time and money, and it put my life and health in peril, because you're talking about the drug cartels are facilitating all this. But when they can call back home and say, yeah, I'm here, I'm in the United States, you were going to get 10,000 Haitians today, it'll be 100,000 Haitians in a few months.
And on September 8th, the Biden administration announced that they would no longer be conducting deportation flights from the United States back to Haiti. So we have created this new incentive for people specifically from Haiti to come to the United States. And of course, if you've been in Haiti lately, you realize the United States is a much better place to be. According to Senator Ted Cruz, he estimated, and I don't know where these figures come from, but he said that 85% of the migrants at the border currently could be from Haiti. So we are seeing a surge, but I think it's the point that you make that not everybody at the southern border is coming from Mexico. It really is an international entry point for the country. But there is the Biden administration has said that the one way that they want to stem immigration from the southern border is to deal with what they refer to as root causes, issues like violence and corruption and poverty, as a way of making people want to stay where they are. What do you think of that approach to our immigration issue?
Okay, it's completely backwards, Joseph. Violence and corruption and poverty, unfortunately, are staples of the third world, of developing nations. In fact, that's one of the reasons why they're still impoverished, is because of the corruption. When we see that, again, all over Central America, Asia, and Africa, and even South America. But that's something that these nation states have to do to get their own houses in order. In the meantime, we need to secure our border. On the Armed Services Committee, I put an amendment in the National Defense Authorization Act that said it is the will it's the will of Congress that we recognize that our southern border, securing it, is a national security issue. Every Republican on the committee, all 28 of us, voted for it. And we got 5 Democrats to vote for it. So we actually won the day on that count. But 26 Democrats voted against it because the wokeism of the far left now, of which Joe Biden is really a party to, if not a slave to, doesn't want to recognize the southern border. They want to put their head in the sand and have an open border policy. When you do that, you're not doing what's in the best interest of this nation state, because the folks that are coming here are not highly skilled laborers. They're not engineers. I mean, they're not scientists. CNN will find one that is, of course, but by and large, they're not. And they're not going to very much struggle to work in this economy and to be a contributing member of society. Unfortunately, we're a debtor nation. The costs alone for the 1.5 million that have been let in this year is estimated by the Congressional Budget Office to be $160 billion over the next 10 years. And that's what they're admitting to. So it's going to be probably hundreds of billions of dollars more. We don't have this money, Joseph. So we need to secure the border now and to make sure that Americans are safe. Because if you're not safe, then you're not free.
And that's the truth. If you're not safe, you're not free. And it's strange. Just as we kind of try to evaluate the worldview of the different political perspectives, how much zeal there isn't for guarding the border and kind of policing crime in the middle of our cities compared to how much zeal there is for trying to make people get vaccines and wear masks. And wherever you fall on those issues, proportionality seems to suggest that one is a bigger problem long-term for our country than the other, but the amount of energy being placed does not seem to reflect that proportionality. But Congressman Fallon, there's an underrated kind of component to this border story in that the Federal Aviation Administration had placed a 2-week flight restriction on drones along the southern border, allegedly because they did not want footage of what is happening. At least this is the suspicion, that they did not want footage of what is happening at the southern border to get out. They have since apparently done away with that ban, and Fox News at least has regained clearance to fly their drones. What do you think is happening there on the drone question?
No, Joseph, that's exactly like when we visited the Donna holding facility back, I believe it was in February. There was what we nicknamed the KGB handler. It was somebody that worked for Homeland that was working directly for the secretary, and she was walking around with 10 members of Congress. She told us that we couldn't take pictures. We couldn't have our phones in the facility. Of course, we all ignored her and took the phones in. And because my job is to inform 787,000 constituents in Northeast Texas about what's really going on all matters, the truth, to be transparent. And that's exactly the opposite of what the Biden administration wants to do. They want to say, no, look over here. They want to talk about COVID all the time because it's the only thing he's still polling well on. He's polling poorly and he's underwater on everything else. So they don't want the truth to get out, because I'll tell you something. If the American people knew the truth at the border, they would be crying and screaming from the rooftops. They would be getting their pitchforks and torches out, demanding that we secure the border. So let's just examine this very quickly. The drug cartels are profiting wildly from mass unlawful migration. They make money in 2 ways. One, when 60% of our border and customs patrol are processing human beings in a humane manner, changing diapers, administering COVID tests, and feeding folks, then it's a lot easier for your drug dealer to smuggle your drugs into the United States. So fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamine is on the rise. So they make a lot more money that way. But also, folks are so poor in Central America, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and I would imagine Haiti as well, that they can't even afford the transit to get to the border. So the cartels say, don't worry, we'll get you up there, but you owe us once you get there. And this is a real big problem because the cartel has such a presence in Central America. They use the families of these migrants as collateral. And there's indentured servants in the United States today.
Congressman Pat Fallon, we are out of time, unfortunately. There's so much more I wanted to get to with you, including General Milley, but we're going to have to do that at another date. But thank you so much for taking your time to be with us today. Appreciate it.
Joseph, I look forward to it. Thanks. Take care.